Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly wild and honestly kind of terrifying story straight out of the freezer aisle. Just imagine this for a second. You build a massively popular ice cream brand. You get it stocked in the biggest grocery stores in the country. You build a fiercely loyal customer base, and then, boom, out of nowhere, you're filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And here's the crazy part. It's not because people stopped buying the ice cream. No, it's literally because of the cardboard carton it came in. We're looking at a multi-million-dollar business crisis where a single packaging decision unraveled an entire empire. So let's break down exactly how this happened.
Okay, so let's just jump right into the deep end here. $23,785,000. Now that is not a sales target, okay? It's not a massive new marketing budget, and it definitely isn't a fresh round of VC funding. That number is a staggering federal judgment that was just handed down against Rebel Creamery. They're a privately held ice cream company based out of Utah. And this single, massive legal penalty, it's the crushing financial weight that forced a seemingly unstoppable company into an absolute existential crisis. Which brings us to the central mystery of our explainer today. Like, how exactly did a dispute over pastel packaging bankrupt a nationwide brand? Normally, right, when you hear about a food company going under, you assume something went horribly wrong with the actual food. You know, a massive supply chain failure, a huge recall, or maybe consumer tastes just shifted. But here, the ice cream inside the pint was exactly what consumers wanted. The product was a total hit. The multi-million-dollar problem, the one that literally broke the bank, was entirely on the outside.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates just how incredibly well Rebel Creamery was doing. This was not a failing business when it came to sales. Actually, scratch that, it was the exact opposite. Rebel made a massive name for itself by capitalizing on that huge health trend we all know: low-carb, keto-friendly ice cream. And the public? They absolutely ate it up. They weren't just some boutique regional brand. They were stocked in the absolute biggest retail giants in the US. We're talking Walmart, Target, Kroger, Safeway, the whole shebang. They were a total fixture in grocery stores nationwide, completely dominating their specific niche and moving millions of pints.
So to really get why this retail giant came to a screeching halt, we need to understand a very specific legal concept. It's called trade dress. Now, what is that? Well, trade dress is basically the overall visual appearance of a product, the packaging, the design, the specific colors that signifies the source of a product to us, the consumers. Think about it like this: the iconic contoured shape of a glass Coca-Cola bottle, or, that very specific robin's egg blue of a Tiffany jewelry box. It's the visual shortcut your brain uses in the grocery store to instantly say, yep, that's my favorite brand. This entire legal dispute was about Rebel's visual identity and whether they illegally and intentionally mimicked a competitor to trick that shortcut in the consumer's brain.
All right, let's look at the timeline and see how this conflict actually brewed over the years. Back in 2008, a brand called Van Leeuwen started out as this humble artisan ice cream truck rolling around the streets of New York City. By 2016, Van Leeuwen had grown a ton and introduced a very distinctive packaging design for their retail pints. Now, the very next year, in 2017, Rebel Creamery was founded thousands of miles away in Utah. Fast forward to early 2019, a Van Leeuwen employee just happens to be walking down a grocery aisle, spots Rebel's packaging on the shelf, and does a complete double take at the glaring similarities. I mean, no way, right? Well, this simmering tension finally boiled over in 2021 when Van Leeuwen officially slapped Rebel Creamery with a federal lawsuit over their trademark rights.
Now, when you look at the two brands side by side, you see exactly what the courts had to analyze in, like painstaking detail. Van Leeuwen aggressively accused Rebel of straight-up copying their signature look to piggyback on their brand recognition. They pointed out their own design features: monochromatic cardboard pints with matching lids, a primarily pastel color palette, distinctive black script lettering, and an overall minimalist aesthetic. Okay, so what about Rebel's packaging? Strikingly identical on almost every single front. Monochromatic cardboard pints, matching lids, pastel tones, black script spelling out the brand name, and that same minimalist design. Now, Rebel, for their part, firmly denied the allegations in court. They insisted, their designers were completely unaware of Van Leeuwen's packaging when they dreamed up the Rebel aesthetic.
But the judge in the Eastern District of New York was absolutely not buying Rebel's defense. U.S. District Judge Eric Comite delivered a devastating, definitive ruling that was basically the climax to this bitter legal battle. He stated, "The evidence at trial left no doubt that Rebel infringed and diluted Van Leeuwen's trade dress and did so intentionally." Oof. He explicitly pointed out that there was genuine consumer confusion and, crucially, bad faith on Rebel's part. It wasn't just a happy accident. According to the court, it was a deliberate strategy. And man, it resulted in an absolute disaster for the Keto ice cream maker.
So how did the court arrive at that massive nearly $23.8 million figure we talked about at the very beginning? Well, it's pretty interesting. Van Leeuwen actually came after Rebel initially for a staggering $36.4 million, basically demanding Rebel fork over all the profits made during the infringement period. However, Judge Committee made a really crucial adjustment to the math. He reduced that initial award by 33%, saving Rebel roughly $12.6 million. Why? Because the judge recognized a fascinating reality of the market. He noted that some of Rebel's sales were driven purely by the booming consumer demand for keto and better-for-you ice cream, not just because of the copycat packaging. But listen, even with that generous 33% reduction acknowledging their actual product merit, Rebel was still on the hook for nearly $23.8 million of their profits.
And this perfectly illustrates the sheer, terrifying math problem Rebel was suddenly staring down overnight. Based on their bankruptcy filings, they reported approximately $13.78 million in total estimated assets. But their estimated liabilities? A crushing $23.85 million. That Van Leeuwen judgment alone accounts for practically all of that debt. So, to put that into simple, brutal business terms, Rebel Creamery was ordered by a federal judge to pay out millions more than the entire company literally had to its name.
Let's break down exactly what that $13.78 million in assets looks like in the real world, just to truly understand the pressure they're under here. According to their voluntary bankruptcy petition, Rebel has about $5.22 million in actual cash and cash equivalents on hand. They have $5.65 million sitting in inventory, meaning all those physical pints of ice cream in warehouses just waiting to be sold. And they've got $2.59 million in accounts receivable, money currently owed to them by retailers. Now, honestly, that is a perfectly healthy-looking balance sheet for a normal day of business. It shows a company that is actively selling a product and making money. But it is entirely hopelessly insufficient when you have a nearly $24 million judgment instantly knocking at your front door demanding payment.
So, what do? Well, you have to understand Rebel's survival strategy here, because bankruptcy isn't always just about throwing in the towel and closing up shop forever. Chapter 11 is specifically designed for corporate reorganization. 2 days before filing for bankruptcy, Rebel officially filed an appeal against that massive $23.8 million judgment. Then they filed for Chapter 11 in Utah. Why do this 1-2 punch? Because entering Chapter 11 throws up an immediate legal shield. It protects the company's current assets from creditors. This includes Van Leeuwen, who essentially has to get in line as an unsecured creditor with a disputed claim and just wait. They can't immediately seize Rebel's cash while Rebel attempts to get the massive judgment overturned on appeal. It is a desperate but highly strategic maneuver that buys them the precious time they desperately need to survive.
Right, so what happens next in the freezer aisle while the lawyers are battling it out in appellate court? Well, the impact is actually immediate for the consumer. See, Judge Comedy didn't just award a ton of money, he issued a strict injunction. He ordered Rebel Creamery to immediately stop selling the infringing products in stores and required them to completely redesign their packaging to avoid any further confusion. So those pastel, minimalist Rebel pints you used to see at Walmart and Target, yeah, they don't just get a new barcode sticker. By court order, that physical packaging must vanish from shelves, forcing the company into a massively costly, immediate rebrand while they are literally fighting for their life.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to think about the next time you go grocery shopping. In the cutthroat, hyper-competitive world of consumer goods, is a brand's ultimate survival really based on the quality and taste of what's inside the pint, or is it the colors and fonts on the outside? Rebel Creamery mastered the keto recipe for sure, and they won over millions of taste buds, but an intentional misstep with pastel cardboard has pushed them to the absolute brink of collapse. It's a powerful $24 million reminder that visual identity isn't just some fun marketing exercise. It's the very foundation of modern business survival. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.